Hello, this is Alex, and you're listening to Learn Japanese Pod, and you are listening to the Fun Friday edition, where we talk to cool people doing cool things in Japan. We temporarily put away our textbooks and just talk about whatever. And this week, I am joined by my very good friend, Peter. Peter, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. This is awesome. I gotta say, we're breaking the fourth wall a minute here, but like recording this with not hearing the intro, right? Like the music. I always hear that you say that with the music, so it was like, whoa, what's going on?
It's all smoke and mirrors, dude. It's all smoke and mirrors, and a lot of editing on my part. But
yeah.
By the way, I should say that when I introduce this, I always say we're talking to cool people doing cool things in Japan. And I should say that we're definitely talking to a cool person doing cool things who has done stuff in Japan and will do stuff in the future in Japan, would probably be more accurate, I would say.
Yeah, I did notice that. I was like, I wish I was doing cool stuff in Japan right now.
I'm sure you will be soon, because at the moment, Japan is opening its border to students, people on business, and tour groups.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how that works. I don't have all the details in front of me, but it looks like after a good, 2.5 years, almost 3 years of the dreaded zombie plague that I won't mention, it looks like Japan is finally opening up its borders. And so maybe you might be visiting Japan in the next year or two?
Yeah, I got fingers crossed for the fall. We might get into some of what I do, but there's like a food-related trade show in October. And so I'm like, if things are rocking, maybe I'll try to hit that up.
That would be awesome. By the way, I should back up and say, Peter, for people who don't know you, and some do, because I think some people know you on the Discord channel. But for people who don't know you, who are you? What do you do? Where do you live? If we found you on an average day, what would you be doing?
Average day, I'm in Michigan. That's my home, northern Michigan, far up. I'm sure you have some Michigan listeners. It's a great state. But I have a microbrewery. I started with a friend of mine actually 10 years ago now. And so that's one of the primary things I do. That's probably the most exciting thing I do. I also do some real estate. And you and I were talking just briefly before about real estate in Japan, but I do some of that on the U.S. side. But microbrewery. And so we have a restaurant, a pub, and we brew all our own beer, and we distribute, but mostly in Michigan. We did a little bit. We've explored exporting, primarily because I want to go to Japan, try to work business into it,
Yeah. I know I've always been amazed by these incredible projects you're involved in, and those projects have also kind of spilled into your interest in Japan. So like, as you were mentioning, well, this kind of leads to like how we first met. So I can't actually remember which year it was when we first met. We actually first met in.
I got it.
It was in. You got it.
2018.
It was
I know
2018.
because I remember when that food show was.
Right.
It was 2018, but late, like November, I think. It was a fall event.
2018 feels like it was like 5 or 10 years ago now, just because
it's almost 5 years ago.
It's almost
that's the scary thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually because it is 5 years ago almost.
Yeah. But I hear you. It feels like a whole separate lifetime ago.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were listening to the podcast and then you reached out to me saying, "Hey, we're coming to Japan. Do you want to hang out?"
Yeah.
And I was like, hell yeah. And then I think I vaguely remember we met in Harajuku, right?
Yeah. We went to Yoyogi Park.
Yeah.
We went through the Harajuku, that like strip there that's just packed. And yeah, so I reached out. Bonus tip for everyone. I have a cousin who always told me it's free to ask. And so I took this to heart. So I was like, I'd been listening to your podcast. I was like, I'm going to Tokyo. I think he lives there. I'll just email and see, like, hey, you want to get together? And it worked out. It turned out being pretty cool.
It was awesome. Yeah, it was so much fun to meet up and also meet all your friends. They were really cool. I had so much fun. That was really good. And since then, we've been I would say long distance friends. And we've just been, we regularly catch up, kind of hang out online, talk about life, the universe, and everything. Learning Japanese, traveling around Japan. So I always wanted to record like a fun Friday with you, so I thought this would be perfect. So we can
that's awesome. I'm glad you asked. I like to talk. So I was like, that works, a podcast.
We both like to shoot our mouths off.
Yeah, sometimes it runs on, but
it's all good.
I was thinking so I guess how we met and leading into studying Japanese a little bit. I started back in the very first time I tried to study Japanese was in high school. And it was like there wasn't a lot of internet. There was like those like MSN Messenger. Right. Some people might remember, and like basic chat.
Right.
And so I bought like a book, like a book with a CD, and did not get far. Right. There was like no community. I'm in rural northern Michigan, so I learned like a couple colors to count to 10, and it was like, all right, I'm done. But then I actually picked it up again because I just felt like I was wasting a lot of time on my phone. And I was like, I'm going to get an app that's productive. So I wanted to do something good for my mind. So that's how I jumped back into it. And I had been interested in Japanese growing up because I played a lot of video games, watched like Dragon Ball Z, this type of stuff. And so did some Duolingo for a bit. And then that's kind of shallow. So I was like, I got to go deeper. I got to learn about learning Japanese. And I found your podcast pretty early on. And then that, and I did what was Nihongo Shark at the time, which is now Native Shark. I think you've had Nico on the podcast.
Yeah, we've had Nico on at least 2 or 3 times now. Yeah. And actually, hopefully in the future too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a great way to get into it. A lot of self-study, and we could go down a whole trail there. But I'm always interested to find out what was the initial inspiration or kind of seed of interest that initially got you into Japanese. Now, you mentioned that you were playing video games and you were into anime. And I think like many people who get into studying Japanese usually get to it through popular culture, usually like anime, manga, video games, sometimes even pop music. I think recently there's been a boom in 80s music. City pop,
yeah.
You're talking about, of course.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was because it was featured in like a TikTok or Instagram or something. It went viral, and now everyone's discovering 1980s Japanese pop, or city pop as it's also known. Yeah. So what was the biggest thing that you got you interested in Japanese? Was it the video games, you would say?
Yeah, I'd say video games for sure. Because like growing up, I watched, like I mentioned, Dragon Ball Z, but I like scarcely knew it was Japanese. Because it was just like on Cartoon Network, American television growing up, and obviously it looked a little different, but I wasn't making a lot of the connections. But like I think Nintendo, that was my go-to gaming system, and so that became the games themselves, the legends, like Legend of Zelda or Mario or Final Fantasy, some of those early ones. Those really had a flair of difference, and I don't know. I was always aware they came from Japan, I guess.
Right.
So I definitely, my interest in Japan and Japanese came, I would say, the most strongly through video games and probably The Legend of Zelda, because that was like one of my most popular, or my favorite, and a very popular game.
I came to Japanese through linguistics, really. It wasn't so much through anime, manga, or video games. It was more just I was interested in travel and learning languages. And I've almost come to it backwards, where I came to the language first, and now I'm getting more interested in video games. And one day in the future, I want to do a Learn Japanese Pod video game. But my coding skills aren't up to scratch yet, so I might need some help on that. If you're listening, coders, one day, it would be good. It would be cool to do like a Podkun platform game, or Legend of Podkun or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be so cool. I've always wanted to make a video game, but also I'm with you. My skills aren't there. But I know there's people out there. I want to be involved in some way, help out.
Well, that we have such a great community on the Discord channel. There's so many great people. By the way, if you didn't know, we have a Discord channel, which is a great place to chat to other listeners of Learn Japanese Pod and hang out with other people. And we all sorts of amazing people on there, including people who are great at coding. So that was me dropping a very unsubtle hint for help with coding. The other issue with making games is that it takes roughly 11 billion hours to create a good game, so it is pretty labor intensive. But anyway, getting back to your journey into Japanese, you mentioned that when you started out in Japanese, there wasn't much stuff online, and then eventually you started using apps on your phone.
Yeah.
And then,
so there was a gap for sure. Yeah. Like between that, I studied a little in high school, and then it kind of just fell off, right? I wasn't studying until I came back to it, which I think when I started really studying again was like January, February 2018, before I came to visit you. But I just that year, I had really started regularly studying again.
I guess what I want to know is there are obviously kind of like roadblocks to studying Japanese, but like what I want to know is, what were those challenges you faced trying to study Japanese, and maybe later you can find some useful tips and tricks to overcome those roadblocks, I guess. So what were the biggest challenges?
Well, I'll give my journey. I don't know. Sometimes it's just helpful to hear what other people have done. Yeah. And I'm going to preface this by saying I am not excellent at Japanese. So I haven't figured it out. I'm not like excellent, but things I thought like early on, the coolest thing was like learning the kana. You could learn it in a couple weeks if you use some mnemonic apps and stuff, and you're like, oh man, I got kana down. Look at me, I'm a rock star. I can read everything, all these little things that have furigana and whatnot. And all of a sudden, after that, that's like this huge confident boost. But then a roadblock, I would say, is like after that, it's like a hard slog, right? Because you don't have any vocabulary. You're not progressing at that absurd pace of the first like 2 weeks or a month, where you can just like knock out the alphabet, which meant nothing to you before you started. You were like, what are these chicken scratches? Right. And so I think, staying motivated through that, and just like being like, it's starting with the outset that this is going to be a long-term process, right? That's what I tried to kind of like focus on in the early days. Like, yes, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be exciting things. It's going to be lulls. But like, if I want to learn Japanese, it's going to be a long-term process.
I guess for self-learners of Japanese, back in the day, there was nothing. Apart from Japanese, formal Japanese classes, there was no online stuff. It was all paper. It was all dead tree media, which made it hard. I was lucky because I studied Japanese intensively for a year in Japan. It was all paper. It was all books. This was back in 1994. Can you believe? A million years ago. Then gradually, all this new online content started to appear. And I'm wondering if a new challenge for the self-learner of Japanese is, now there's so much content online, what do you use? It can feel a bit overwhelming, right?
So for sure. So what happened to me, I like kind of geek out over things and go into it. So I just started reading a bunch of things online. And early on, I had mentioned Nihongo Shark. And I started reading some of their stuff. But one of the things he said in his like prep guide or whatever was like, every hour you spend trying to figure out how to study Japanese is an hour you didn't spend studying Japanese.
Yeah, right.
So I was like, okay, well, these guys, I found that resource early on. I'd seen myself spend the whole Saturday afternoons like trying to pick something to study. I was like, I'm just going to start studying these guys' stuff.
Yeah.
And you get bored sometimes. So like you need to branch out, and it's not wrong. Like I'll find new apps, or I'll buy a new manga, even though I haven't read all my manga thoroughly, because it's like, hey, I want to mix it up. Right. And anymore, like even that, like I do like getting physical books. Mangas and stuff. There's something attractive about it. If you learn enough kanji, or you get furigana, is easy to look it up. But if you learn a little bit about the kanji system and the radicals, then you can look kanji up, which is helpful. I think the more resources like that you can get are helpful to get through roadblocks, because when I pick up any sort of native material and even just get one sentence on a page that I'm like, oh, I just totally get that. I know how to read it. I know what it means. Like that's, again, that confident boost, where it's like, okay, maybe I can't plow through this book, but I can pick through it. And there's a lot of things I know. Like that's pretty cool, right?
I sometimes I feel that learners can be their own worst enemy, because they start learning Japanese and then they listen to, for example, like a Japanese movie, or they watch the news in Japanese, or even the weather forecast. And because they're beginners, they can't understand, they understand like 1% of it, and they feel discouraged about that. Whereas it seems that what you're doing is you're just doing a little bit of work regularly, consistently, and getting those small wins and those small confidence boosts along the way on a more kind of long-term basis.
I also subscribe to the concept. I mean, there's different theories in language learning, but I subscribe to the concept that listen as much as you can, even if you're not understanding it. So I've listened to hours and hours of native stuff and podcasts that I can't understand. And I used your podcast. I used to listen to like you and Ami's sections just talking, because I didn't know what was going on early on.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you improved? Awesome. Do you understand a bit more now?
I can pick up topics a lot more, so it's easy. So I don't get it all, but I'd be, oh, they're talking about this or that, or doing this or that. Well, the weakness for me in Japanese for sure is speaking, because I don't have anyone to regularly speak with. So having conversation is very hard. But I would just watch Hajimete no Otsukai, which hit American Netflix, and if you want to look it up on Netflix, I think it's called Old Enough is the translation they use. But First Errand is what it translates as more directly. But what I found about that's awesome, is because it's an actual Japanese show, it's got a ton of the words written out on the screen, and like not translations or subtitles, like how they do on Japanese shows where they write them big, like little phrases and stuff. Yeah. And the kids say simple things, right? Even though they're speaking, and sometimes kids are hard to understand. On that show, they say a lot of simple phrases, which are awesome. Again, because you can pick it up. You're like, oh, this is great.
I think getting that input, or getting that exposure to the language in context, is so vital. I think it's hard for beginners, because we're not beginners at Japanese, right? I won't make any claims about how good my Japanese is, but we're definitely not beginners. And so for us, it's easier to do full immersion. For example, trying to plow through a manga, or trying to watch the news, or watching a TV series in Japanese. We're not as intimidated, and we have at least a basic vocabulary that we can draw on to kind of understand some of it. And as a beginner, you just don't have the the vocabulary to understand anything. And I think it can feel very overwhelming. And so if you're a complete beginner, I don't really know what advice to give, but just try to get as much listening as you can, and try not to feel demoralized or overwhelmed, because this is a long process that it's going to go on for a long time. But the more you can expose yourself to the language in context, as opposed to just kind of very, kind of textbook Japanese. Not that you shouldn't use textbooks, but the more kind of real Japanese you can expose yourself to, the better. Because you pick up this. I'm starting to subscribe to the idea that your brain sorts it out for you. Yeah. You get all this input, doesn't make sense, but if you keep getting it on a regular basis, your brain eventually kind of starts to work it out. And then the more you watch, you start to pick out single words or single topics. And then as you get better, you can actually start to comprehend. But it is a long process, and you do need to do a lot of listening.
Yeah. Well, listening, I would say a thing to do, though, even if you're not understanding it, is just enjoy listening. We both play music. Enjoy listening to the rhythm of it. Enjoy listening to how it sounds. Like something I could start to pick up after listening for a while is, oh, this is Japanese. This isn't Korean. Or when I would watch a show that had Korean or another language, Chinese, I'd be like, oh, I can hear the sound of Japanese. It's got a very different sound, and so I think you have to enjoy what you can where you're at. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And enjoy the learning process. Like you said, you got into it because you liked learning. That was a little bit what I did. I mean, I was like, I want to learn. I want to stretch my brain. Let's do a language. Right. And then, of course, Japanese made sense because there was a ton of things that interested me about it. But enjoying the process. Sometimes we're always focused on just getting to the end. Right. This is what I want to do. And you miss enjoying the journey. It sounds cliche, but
no. I think that's a really important point, because enjoying the journey, I really like that. Because if you enjoy the journey, it's gonna be more sustainable. You're gonna be motivated for longer, which is what you need to do on a long-term basis. So I found that there are various ways to study, but there are two kinds of study. One is intensive, and one is what's called extensive. And intensive is basically where you're studying really hard. It's above your level, and you're learning new information, and you're really putting in a lot of effort. So, for example, you might be studying for the JLPT exam, which is way above your level. You're breaking a sweat. It's maybe not fun. And then there's extensive learning, which is you're exposing yourself to material that's at your level or below. It's easy, it's fun, and you're doing a large volume. So intensive is like doing the heaviest weight at the gym, and extensive is just like kind of doing light jogging or something like that. And I kind of get the feeling that I used to do this. I used to just only do the intensive stuff because I felt that I need to improve my Japanese. So I have to keep learning new vocabulary I don't know. I have to read really difficult kanji. I've got to listen to the hardest movies in Japanese. And it just kind of wore me out, and I lost a lot of motivation because I really just didn't feel like it. Just felt hard all the time. And if it feels hard all the time, you don't feel like you're improving. But then what I finally worked out is if I did more extensive stuff, I actually, exposed myself to material that was really easy at my level or below. I'd actually do a lot more. I'd read a lot more. I'd listen a lot more. It would be more fun. And because of that, I'd actually consolidate what I know. And I'd actually, my memory for vocabulary really improved because I was kind of going over stuff I already knew, but in various different contexts. And that also improves your fluency and your kind of natural sense of the language. So I would say you don't always have to study stuff that's hard. You can expose yourself to stuff that's easy and just enjoy the process, as you were saying.
Yeah. Well, and like we talked about the idea of running, or a little bit, it's the marathon idea, right? This being a long-term thing, marathon runners do not sprint the whole time.
Sure.
Right? And so like you might like crack open a book and study hard for a month, and then you might go slow. What I would encourage, and because I work a lot, so it's like a lot of times I'm not learning a lot of new things, but I'm just showing up every day. Right. And I'm doing 5 minutes, doing 15 minutes. I use a lot of flashcards. So it's like I try to do my flashcard reviews every day on spaced repetition programs. And to me, that's the thing. And then I've had seasons where I'm digging in harder and I'm putting more time in. It's slower in the winter. We're in a seasonal area. A lot of times I have more time to work on stuff then. So yeah, but not taking lulls, but allowing yourself to pace your flow, right? So never quitting, but adjusting that pace. And sometimes it's easier stuff and it's more review stuff, and sometimes it's pushing yourself and learning new stuff.
There's a guy called Kazumoto who created the site All Japanese All the Time, and he has these amazing tweets where he basically writes these kind of motivational tweets for language learning. And he says stuff like, don't do your best, just do something. Or just like you said, you don't need to conquer the mountain. You just need to turn up. What can I do that's fun in Japanese? And all this kind of stuff. So,
I think that the other thing that dovetails into is, as I mentioned earlier on, I'm not great. I can't go have a long conversation with people. I've learned a lot, but I'm not too like fluent or super conversational because I haven't practiced that a lot. But I think that enjoying the process for me has also been, I've learned so much more about Japanese culture. And, it's like I like to cook. So it's like I engage with Japanese foods. I'm going to run into things like pick up new little words, senmai doshi, right? I learned that on your podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
And then I looked them up, and I've made takoyaki, and I bought senmai doshi. And so now I have them, and I kept the wrapper. I keep them by the wrapper, so I see the kanji for it, right? And so it's little things that you can engage with, though, that are fun, that aren't necessarily textbook studying or intensive studying, but enjoying all of the things I've learned. And like during COVID, studying more about what I want to do next time I go to Japan, and travel. And to me, that's all part of the process.
And like we say, you don't need to climb up the north face of the Eiger. You can go around the back. You can go up the You don't have to go up the steep side of the mountain. You can have a leisurely stroll. Enjoy the flowers, so to speak. I think that's great advice. So that's a great segue, Peter, because you were talking about visiting Japan. So where have you visited in Japan?
So this will probably come across funny. I don't know if I've told you this, but I'll start. The first time I went to Japan was actually 2008. I was remembering this. I landed in the airport. I was just out of high school, starting I did a year of community college. So I think it was my first year of community college. And I landed in Japan, and I looked on the TVs in the airport, and there was anime characters doing announcements. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm home. And then 2 hours later, I got on an airplane and went to Beijing because I was just flying through Japan. I was actually going on a little short-term mission thing with an uncle of mine who did work in China. Cool. So, but I was like, I got to get back. I was like, I knew I wanted to go to Japan, but I was like, this place is awesome. So it sticking with your dream too. So it took me 10 years. I finished college, I started the brewery, and then I came back in 2018. And, that I had a good opportunity. And that was the first time I got to actually explore. And, we were there for 2 weeks.
Great.
So I haven't extensively explored Japan in person. I've just been very connected through online, meeting people, a little bit with Discord. I haven't gone as deep as some, again, because I work a lot and I try to study in my downtime.
Cool.
So when I got to Japan in 2018, though, I just explored Tokyo because I had this show I was doing for work but there's so much in Tokyo.
Sure.
And that was not my original draw to Japan. It was more countryside, right? Because I came from like fantasy video games and stuff. You're not like thinking as much city. But I found it to be amazing. I've been to other big cities, and Japan came across or Tokyo came across as so relatively clean. I liked how it had like neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Like you could get a sense even in 40 million people that it never felt too big, because there was always like a little corner shop, and there was like kids walking themselves to school, and there was parks, and they just felt like community sections. I did like 20 miles a day of walking pretty much while I was there. So I was just like hoofing it, exploring neighborhoods.
Right. The amazing thing about Tokyo, I find, and actually most big cities in Japan, is you'll have various downtown areas. Like there's various hubs in Tokyo.
Yeah.
There's no single center, right? And you go to Shinjuku or Shibuya, and you're in the middle of the urban universe. You're in this kind of Blade Runner-esque kind of environment. But then if you go like a couple of stations out into the suburbs, you do find these like really small communities. And depending on where you go, some of those communities are quite closely knit, and they've got their own festivals. Everyone knows each other. And so where I used to live in kind of north of Tokyo, I was only 10 minutes out from Shinjuku, the center of the universe. And then I get 10 minutes on the train, and I'd be in my local neighborhood with old ladies, walking around with their walking sticks, and everyone talking to each other, like this kind of old village kind of vibe to it. Yeah. So Tokyo has really cool neighborhoods. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it to be so cool and different. We went to, I'm terrible on names, so I always forget, but the cat shrine temple with all the Maneki Nekos.
Gotokuji, I think.
Yeah, Gotokuji.
Gotokuji.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And it was like a totally different area.
Yeah.
Right? Like you get out there, and it's like, but it was Tokyo. And I found other spots like that weren't maybe as well known as that one, because it has all the Maneki Neko. But I think that to me, it was wild. It was a lot of fun to explore around and find these little neighborhoods, and that whole concept to me was very foreign. U.S. cities didn't feel as much that way. They do have some of it, but it's different.
Yeah. In Tokyo, I think you have everything. You've got everything from, the robot restaurant dancing show, shopping, big department stores, neon signs everywhere, down to like small little sleepy neighborhoods with, an Oba-chan trundling along, and just a cat asleep on the road. With nothing happening.
Yeah, the cats are awesome in Japan. Yeah. The only thing, so I love food, so that was probably a lot of my highlights.
Sure.
Of course, we went to Tsukiji Fish Market, and just walking into random ramen shops off the street and seeing their takes on it, to me, was awesome. But I think I forgot what I was going to say about the food. Well, that was a thing too with the neighborhoods, is they would smell like food, because there's little tiny restaurants everywhere. They're not big restaurant districts. I mean, there's some of that, but it's like every street has a tiny 8-seater or
Yeah.
15-seater restaurant.
Right.
In the US, it's like all these big restaurants.
I mean, sure, they have chain restaurants like anywhere else,
Yeah.
but you know, people ask me, so where's the good food at? And you know, the running joke is, okay, I'm going to put a blindfold on you, spin you around, just walk in a random direction and follow your nose. You'll bump into some just amazing restaurant, and they're all in random places. I mean, obviously you have some pretty upscale restaurants in, you know, downtown, but in these random neighborhoods that you wouldn't have thought of visiting, you can find all kinds of like culinary gems, just amazing ramen places, gyoza places, teishoku, like all kinds of traditional Japanese food. It's amazing. It's you are spoilt by a wealth of restaurants in Japan. It's amazing. There is no one place. There's no one place for good food. Yeah.
No, I think it's the craft culture, right? Like,
Yes.
I think that Japanese pour themselves into something, and they're not going to open a restaurant to do it okay, or to maximize profits, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to skip all the steps of making a good ramen to just trick the tourists. And put a cheap bowl out there.
Yeah.
And so to me, that came across, like you said, there's just amazing food all over. And the smells. A lot of cities smell bad, but because there's these little shops making delicious food everywhere, a lot of the streets just smell like food. It was awesome. I loved that.
Just going back to your point about these kind of specialist restaurants, there is that tendency for restaurants in Japan to go like narrow and deep. So you'll have like a restaurant that does ramen, but they only use chicken broth. Or a restaurant that does gyoza, like gyoza dumplings, but they're like vegan. They're just vegan dumplings or something. But they'll drill down into like a really specific thing, and they'll be like the best in its class in Tokyo. So you can always find like the best gyoza restaurant, or, well, I wouldn't say there's the best ramen restaurant, because ramen is ubiquitous. That's quite a that's a hotly contested topic in Japan amongst my Japanese friends. I'm like, I love Ippudo ramen, and they all look at me like, what's wrong with you? Ippudo sucks. You've got to go to Ieke. Ieke is the best ramen. I'm like, yeah, but I don't like all that nori in the soup. And they're like, you don't like nori what's wrong with you? You crazy gaijin. What are you talking about? So, the food is amazing. Your taste buds will explode when you come here to Japan, definitely.
And I want to put one more thing out. I think that there's this thought that like it's so expensive to go to Tokyo, you can't afford it. I will say you can go to the Wagyu restaurants and spend, $300 on dinner.
Sure.
But you can literally go get an amazing bowl of ramen for like $5.
100%.
$8.
Yeah.
It's like, I was blown away. I would be like, this is the type of stuff I want to eat. I'm not looking for fancy dinners. And then the pricing was very competitive. I thought, as a tourist traveling around, who's like, you could eat good food on $20 a day.
Yeah, if you compared it to, the city I know is London, where just everything is expensive. I want a sandwich. Sure, it's 20 pounds. Well,
right.
I know it's maybe not that expensive, but everything is damn expensive. But exactly as you say, if you are more kind of open in your tastes, you're more like an Anthony Bourdain when you go to Japan. And he's one of these guys who doesn't. He's like an anti-snob, I would say. He's happy to eat all like the really posh food down to the street soul food that everyone eats. And if you keep yourself open to that, you'll find some amazing food that doesn't break the bank. Now, if you do go to some areas in Japan, you will be paying through the nose, but absolutely, you can find delicious cheap food. No problem.
Well, and that's what I want to encourage people. Don't feel like if you're on a budget, like, well, I don't know if I can do it because it's so expensive. Like, no, there's great stuff that is affordable. Like, if you open your mind, if you like trying new things, if you're not super picky, I found a lot of amazing food. And I mean, even going to like the konbini is an experience for someone who hasn't been to Japan a lot. I mean, I would get a lot of breakfasts there. I want to try all this different onigiri, and we'll just eat it while we walk around for the morning, you know?
I had a friend, he said when he came to Japan, it was like he played Russian roulette with onigiri every morning because he wanted to eat something, but he had no idea what was in it because he couldn't read any kanji at the time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know, I guess I'll do this one. And he kind of bites into it. I guess I'm eating fish roe this morning.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say you do have to be a bit more adventurous in your tastes, but yeah, you can easily eat on a budget in Japan. In fact, I do find that cooking for yourself in Japan can be very cheap. Yeah, no,
I bet.
So I guess that's a good tip for travelers, isn't it? It's keep an open mind. You can find really cheap, delicious food. You don't have to go to all the expensive restaurants and blow your money. Yeah.
Yeah. I found it a great time without doing that. So that's what I wanted to encourage people.
From your memory of visiting Japan in 2018, do you have any kind of tips or tricks for the first time visitor to Japan?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say the first thing is that Narita Airport is very far away from Tokyo.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I mean, people said that, but after a long flight and you get there and then you're trying to figure out the trains, you're like, oh, yes, this is long. So they have like an express I would definitely get the express. If you were going to spend money somewhere, I would get the express. And then if you look at tickets ahead of time and just fly into Haneda if that works for you.
Flying in and out of Narita puts an extra couple of hours of pain onto your potentially very long flight. So yeah, I totally agree. Definitely fly into Haneda if you can.
Yeah. Now, the only caveat I'll give to that is that probably my favorite experience of my trip was the last day when we left. We went to Narita. They have lockers there. So there's another tip. Like we had all day, but we didn't want to carry our bags. We dropped them at like these pay lockers. Yeah. And then I took the train from the airport back into whatever the nearest little town was.
Right.
That had an onsen. And I walked from there, like, I don't remember, a couple miles to an onsen that was literally in a rice field.
Oh,
and
awesome.
Then relaxed, and because I hadn't got to an onsen all trip, and I love hot tubs and hot water, and so relaxed, got all rested, walked through the idyllic rice field back to the train, and then got on the flight, all relaxed and ready.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, that's great. That's so awesome. That's so cool. Like one moment you're sitting in a onsen in the middle of a rice field, and then you're on a plane back to the States.
I like
That's
to think
cool.
about that stuff.
Yeah.
And I had time. I wouldn't rush. If you have like 2 hours at the airport, don't try to do that, right? I had like 6 hours or whatever because we went early. But that was cool.
I'd be really interested to get your opinion of Kansai. Like next time you come back to Japan.
Yeah.
And if you get the opportunity, it'd be really interesting to hear how you think Kansai compares to Tokyo. Because I think the vibe is definitely very different. It's
from what I've seen. Oh, you lived there, right?
Yeah, I lived in Osaka for a while. Yeah.
So, from what I've seen, it definitely appears different, and food is amazing. So I want to go there. Next time I come, I'm probably going to go to Shiga. Because I know some people there, because Michigan has the sister prefecture as Shiga, and so I want to go there.
That's interesting.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna go there in 2020. Right. That was when I had been working on some leads from the trade show I went to at the very end of 2018, and was planning a trip for winter 2020, and it was just, the thing we don't speak of. But I would have gone to Shiga to a beer festival. We were going to bring our beer to this beer festival and do like some of the people I knew from the exchange program with Michigan, like the cultural exchange would be there, and it was going to be cool. So I'd still like to do that at some point if, when things open up here.
That would be awesome. Dude, let me know when you're going down there, because I'd love to kind of hang out with you in Shiga in Kansai. Shiga, I have a couple of friends from Shiga, including Beb, who was the original person I recorded this podcast with, and she's actually from Shiga. And my good friend Makiko, she's from Shiga as well. And Shiga is famous for the Lake Biwa, or Biwako, which is this very large lake slap bang in the middle of Kansai. I think that would be a really cool trip, because obviously you're going to hang out with your friends in Shiga, but right next door is Kyoto.
Right.
And then you've got, another 20 minutes on the train, you're in Osaka. Nara is around the corner. And you can even like go down to Kobe as well. And there's so much stuff to do in Kansai. It's great.
Yeah, so that was my thought. I mean, Shiga is like on the doorstep. Or I don't know, is Shiga considered Kansai? Or
that is
too far north?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, so
southern Shiga maybe but not northern Shiga.
So one time I was with Beb and her husband, and then Beb was like, Kansai Ben 教えてあるで. So I'm going to teach you Kansai Ben. And then her husband just said, できる? Like, can you?
Can you? Yeah.
And she's like, 何? だって滋賀の人でしょ. Like, 滋賀人. She's like, うるさいお前. So like, you shut up.
yeah, shut up. You. Like, I am Kansai.
I would say linguistically and culturally they're close enough. I paint them all with the same brush. They're all Kansai Jin to me.
Well, certainly on the map.
On the map,
was my
they
thinking.
are. Yeah,
I was like,
I'm probably technically wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, Shiga, I will then go to Osaka and Kyoto, is what I thought, when I looked at the map. Yeah, certainly, like you said, it might be too far south, but I think a little like south and west is like the Japan Sea, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, and there's like these bridges that you can go over, like a bunch of bridges that you can like bike over. That look awesome.
You mean like Awaji? You mean like on the Akashi side, right?
I think so.
So if you basically, if you're in Shiga and you go due southwest, you hit Osaka, keep going along the coast through to Kobe, going due west, and then you keep going to Akashi, and you've got the Akashi suspension bridge, which is this absolute monster of a bridge, and you can go over that bridge to Awaji Island, and then basically from there you can go on to Shikoku Island. It's a beautiful part of Japan, and the islands around there are like really. You can also do like river cruise. I would say cruises, not river cruises, but cruises there. There's like Shodo Island and Awaji Island. It's a really, really beautiful area. Really nice in spring, really nice in autumn. I highly recommend it. But I think your head will explode when you go to downtown Osaka. It's such a cool city.
I'm pumped. So probably my wife and I want to come for a big trip. I think I've told you a little bit about this. It'll either be spring 2023 or fall 2023. So next year.
Great.
So if I came for that trade show this fall, it'd probably be like another 2-week trip, but we want to do like a 2-month trip. It's kind of our goal. I'm trying to plan with work and stuff. I've been at building my company for a while, so it's like I need to step away. They say every 10 years it's healthy to take like a sabbatical or what you might call it to refresh and give yourself enough space to think. So that's what I'm planning towards. And then, we'd have time to do some of this stuff where you can travel around a little and have fun.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. So, hey, let's make a tentative date there. If you're coming down to, if you're going to Kansai, I'll definitely join you on the Shinkansen. We can go down there. Maybe we can meet Beb and try some of the local beers. One last topic I wanted to pick your brain on because you are an expert at brewing.
Yes.
It's been rumored that you know a thing or three about beer. What is your opinion on Japanese beer compared to American beer? And I guess, there are different categories. Like you've got your normal kind of consumer brands like Asahi, stuff you just buy in the local supermarket. But I think maybe it's more interesting to talk about like the craft brew scene in Japan and in the States. Are there any differences? What do you think?
Well, you have, first, let's be honest, you have Namabiru.
Sure.
Which you're just going to get whatever that is.
Yeah. So we should just teach everyone that, like, if you go to an izakaya and you just say Nama actually means in that context draft beer. So whatever they have on tap. Yeah.
But it's like the kanji for life. So
yes.
I think, which I think is great because living beer is what they're talking about. So like a lot of mass produced beer is pasteurized, especially if it's packaged in like cans.
Sure.
But draft beer often and historically was not pasteurized.
Sure.
And so it just maybe a little bolder flavor. It had yeast in there yet. And so I actually have studied a lot of kanji and I love word etymology a little bit to see how these things go, because to me, like life beer being the phrase for draft beer has a lot of meaning.
Sure.
If you're a brewer. But anyways, to the broader question, I think, and I haven't had extensive Japanese craft beer, but I've had some, and, we get some imports of stuff. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on in Japanese craft beer. I think you're seeing flavors that you don't usually get. Like I had yuzu beer. Right. I had a Bonito IPA with Katsuobushi.
Wow.
I thought it was going to be terrible. I actually liked it. It was like subtle smoke. You could easily overdo with an ingredient like that, right?
Sure.
And come across too strong. Yokoso Brewing. I'm sure you've seen them.
Yeah, sure.
They did that. The Bonito Flake beer. I can't remember what they called it, but you could probably look it up.
It sounds terrible, but actually it was really good, yeah?
Yeah, it wouldn't be my go-to for everything, but I thought it would be terrible, so I had to try it. Right. And it was, I enjoyed it. But then beyond that, I tried a few small brands. I think there's some work to be done on quality for sure.
Sure.
With different brands. Everybody's different, so I don't want to generalize, but I think that Japanese craft beer has lagged behind the U.S. The U.S. kind of like took beer back, so to speak, and was like, hey, we're going to do this craft thing and like revolutionized it for the world. Before that, you'd think like beer, where does beer come from? Belgium, and I love Belgian beers. Those guys are doing great things, but it's narrow, right? There's variety in Belgian beer, but there's also not the variety in like American craft beer.
Right.
So,
right.
The idea that beer could be anything is I think what was the coolest thing about the craft beer movement. And I think seeing the Japanese take that and take that ethos, beer can be anything, and import it with their culture, like things like Bonito Flakes or Yuzu. I like that. I like to see where the experimentation's going.
It kind of, it's probably a false link here, but it reminds me of Japanese pizza. They'll put anything on those. Things that would raise the eyebrows of your average American or Brit. And sometimes it's great. Like teriyaki chicken pizza is fantastic. I love that stuff. I'm sure some purists would just roll their eyes at that. But yeah, I think Japan.
What's the worst pizza?
What's the worst pizza? Like mentaiko pizza. So it's like the fish roe that I can't eat it. I just don't. It's too fishy for me, and it just or natto pizza, which is fermented beans. That is whew, that's
so
quite
I've
the
tried
pizza.
a lot of things, but I've never tried natto. I got to do it at some point.
You got to do it. No, you got to do it.
It's just like this bar is so high, right? Of like, it's terrible, but a lot of people love it, and so I'm like scared a little bit.
No, it's what in England it's what we call Marmite. Marmite is this yeast, you know it, right? It's this yeast spread that you put on bread, right? And you either love it or you hate it. There's no in between. Even amongst Brits. I mean, I was brought up with Marmite, so I absolutely love the stuff like a drug. But natto is the same thing. You'll find that opinion is very. I think most Japanese people like it, but I have met some Japanese people who are, I just can't stomach that stuff, which is funny because it's a very, very traditional Japanese food, but it's one of these Marmite type foods that really splits opinion. Just going back to beers again, some of my favorite beers are, I don't know if you tried this one, Ko Edo beer. So they do like an IPA and a blonde, and there's another one. Mino Brewery in Osaka does some good beers. So Mino is in, it's just outside Osaka. It's actually between Osaka and Kobe. And there's a really beautiful waterfall in Mino. And they make some really good beers there. And another beer I like is a craft beer that's readily available in some bars in Tokyo is the Baird Brewing Company, and they're actually from Shizuoka. And you may have actually had some of their stuff, perhaps.
Possibly. I talked to somebody about it. I was talking to somebody recently, and they mentioned that because we're Beard's Brewery, and so it obviously sounds a little bit like Baird.
Baird. Right. I think I'm saying that right.
I would love to try more Japanese craft beer. There's not a ton, like, again, the stuff I'm getting, like Hitachino, that's the one with the owl, right?
Right.
The nest, like, they have some fun stuff that gets exported over here, right? So I'm a little bit limited to what I see get exported. A lot of these really, the smaller ones, some of the ones you're mentioning, they probably don't export, or at least not to small towns, maybe to like LA or somewhere. But
I think the one with the owl is the Kikuchi Brewery, I think.
Is
it Kikuchi? I think, and they do.
Sounds right.
I think they do an IPA, which I've had before, which is like really good. But some people ask, like, what, Japanese people make beer? Yeah, of course they do, because they've been making sake since the dawn of time. So they know a thing or two about making alcohol. So it's great.
Oh yeah, and I was not. Yeah, I hope I didn't come across negative on Japanese beer. I think they've just the progression of craft beer in Japan has been behind America a little bit.
Yeah.
So like perfecting the craft a little bit more for some of the newer breweries, and we see that in the U.S. too. People that are new at it, like, and I think the potential for Japan is even greater because of that craft culture we talked about, where it's like they're gonna go deep. Once they get there, they're gonna be making the best craft beer in the world. It's kind of like with whiskey, like they imported a ton of American whiskey whenever that was, or years ago, and now Japan also makes some of the best whiskey in the world. Yeah,
they made it their own, and then they improved it. Yeah.
Yep.
There's a lot of good booze out there. I do want to, next time you come to Japan, there's a bar called Popeyes in Ryogoku, which is near the basho where all the sumo wrestlers are. And they have like 57 beers on tap. And it's all local craft beers that you've never heard of, which is some pretty adventurous stuff like chocolate beer and like yuzu beer and stuff like yone, which is great. But yeah, we will have a beer adventure in Japan. Hopefully sooner than later. Hey, so listen, Peter, we've been yapping on for a little over an hour, and
blows by, doesn't it?
It goes by just like at toyumani. That's a good phrase. At toyumani, like it goes by in a
toyumani.
At toyumani, yeah, it goes by in a flash. In a blink of an eye. But that was so awesome talking to you, and it's great to catch up with you. I'm super looking forward to hanging out with you in Japan, and please keep a bar stool ready for me, because I totally want to visit you in Michigan. I want to check out your brewery. It just looking at your website, it's just so cool. Actually, I was going to say, please tell our lovely listeners where they can find out more about your brewery and anything that you post online. What's the best place to go to?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Beard's Brewery. So a beard like on your face, beardsbrewery.com. But if you want to like stay up on the regular, probably Instagram, Beard's Brewery, or Facebook, Beard's Brewery. We post the most right now on Instagram. But the social media is great. And we're building out a bar in our basement area of the brewery that's going to be just a drinks bar, because the upstairs has a lot of restaurant going on. That we're super pumped. So I will save you a bar stool there. Yes. Because it's going to be in the brewery. So you'll see the brewing from the bar seats. It's going to be great.
By the way, I just wanted to say your website looks amazing. It's just the graphic design and the color scheme and the navigation, and it's an amazing website. So that's beardsbrewery.com. Definitely check it out. And then you've got links to your Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and also YouTube, because you do your own videos and stuff. You have like your own kind of podcasts and stuff.
So we haven't pushed YouTube hard, but we've done a variety of things. From like we did a thing called What's Your Craft before COVID, where we interviewed like artisans and crafters. That's on like the lifestyle section, I think, of the brewery page. And then we make little skits and just kind of have fun. And that's on the regular Beards Brewery YouTube page. But a lot of those are just, we use YouTube to host it more, and we put them on other outlets, but you can catch them on YouTube as well.
Great. Well, hey, Peter, thanks so much. It was great to catch up with you, and thanks for hanging out with me. Hopefully we can do this again. Let's record another podcast sometime.
For sure.
And hopefully I will be hanging out with you in Michigan, or you will be hanging out with me in Tokyo sooner than later.
Yes. Hopefully within the next year. At least me could get to you.
Yeah,
I don't know what your schedule looks like.
Well, sake is on me. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person again soon. Thanks a lot, Peter. And hey, everyone, thanks for listening. See you soon on the next podcast.